Hey Squishies, back again with another vlog. This is Steven Universe, Season 5, Episodes 1 to 4, I think. Almost everything I've seen lists them as Episodes 1 to 4, but Xfinity, which is where I watched them, lists them as Season 4, Episodes 26, 7, 8, and 9. So, I'm gonna go with what most sources say. But just in case, turns out that literally everyone else is wrong and Xfinity is right. There you go. Now I know in the past I've said I would do, once I caught up with the series, I would do 1, 2, 3 episodes per vlog. But since these aired all on one night originally, I'm going to treat them as kind of one long episode. But the individual episode titles are Stuck Together, The Trial, Off Colors, and Lars's Head. Now, I'm gonna do something I don't normally do, which I normally don't get much into kinda what's gonna happen type speculation, because to me that's just generally not very interesting. But for whatever reason with this, I just couldn't help it. Ideas sparking. First thing is, so obviously the big thing here is like this new wrinkle on Rose Quartz killing Pink Diamond and the suggestion that maybe she didn't. I don't like that as a plot development. I think if Steven's mom didn't kill Pink Diamond, then it doesn't make a lot of sense character-wise. It kind of takes some very interesting developments that were happening with Steven's character and chops him off. That said, well, there was something interesting stated in this episode, which is, according to Blue Diamond, Pink Diamond was killed with a sword, not the breaking point. Which is interesting. For a few reasons. One is that it implies that the breaking point existed at the time. Like, if Steven thinks she was killed with a breaking point, presumably Steven knows something about the history of the rebellion. Like, at some point he's probably asked Pearl about it. So he probably has a clearer idea of the timeline than we do. So I'm just going to assume that that's the case, and that therefore the breaking point existed before. Like, Bismuth's disappearance happened before Pink Diamond was killed, which would mean that Garnet and Pearl and Amethyst were all... Well, no, not Amethyst, actually. Amethyst was definitely after Bismuth. But the Garnet and Pearl were already part of the rebellion before Pink Diamond was killed. Which means the answer happened before Pink Diamond was killed, which is something I've wondered about for a long time. But putting that aside, the fact that she was killed with a sword, we already know from Bismuth that Rose's sword can't shatter gems. It was specifically designed to poof them very easily, but be incapable of shattering them. So it can't be Rose's sword that she was killed with. But Rose had to have had her sword by that point. If the breaking point existed, Bismuth disappeared right after showing the breaking point to Rose, because Rose refused to use it and poofed her and hid her away somewhere. She appears not to have yet at that point. So if she poofed... Sorry, so if she'd already poofed bismuth, her sword had to have been made sometime before that, because bismuth made the sword. So Rose had her sword at that point, and therefore can't have used her sword. So it does look kind of like Rose Quartz can't have done it, but then Steven has 4 moms. What if one of his other moms did it? Somebody who would have been allowed to get close, not because she was trusted, but because she was seen as harmless. Pearl. My running thing, my running idea is Pearl killed Pink Diamond, which then would be why Yellow Diamond seems pretty clearly to be trying to cover something up. And I think it's much more interesting that she would be trying to cover up that, for Steven's character development, I think it's much more interesting that Yellow Diamond would be trying to cover up that someone as low levels of Pearl killed a diamond. That such a thing is possible. Like, it would make sense for her to want to cover that up because, holy shit, revolution would be almost inevitable if that turned out to be true, if diamonds turned out to be that vulnerable. How many gems would say, well then why, how many gems only listen to the diamonds out of fear? Most of them do it because it's just what they know, but how many of them wish for something else but don't do it out of fear? And maybe that's the point of showing us Topaz, who clearly doesn't want to be living the life she leads, doesn't want to be doing what she's doing, but she does it out of fear of what will happen to her if she doesn't. And we've seen what happens when gems stop fearing their superiors. That's what happened in the zoo arc. The assorted earth quartzes in that one went against agate. Was that what the Overseer gem was called? Regardless, the point is, Homeworld is ripe for rebellion. So that's kind of my speculation of where they're going with all of this. Kind of a mix of wishful thinking, what I think would be more interesting, and what I think I can support out of the text. The only other thing I'll toss out there is that there's one huge building in the background of a couple of shots on Homeworld. It's in the title card for Off Colors. It looks suspiciously like shoulders and a neck and a head with spiky hair, and it's all really white. What if that's pink, White Diamond? What if White Diamond is, like, building-sized? Or that could be, like, the Diamond's residence or something. I don't know. Alright, so now let's get to the actual, like, talking about kind of stuff I usually talk about. And the main thing I want to talk about really is Lars. Now, I've been really hard on Lars. And deservedly so, I think. Lars has consistently been an asshole. But in the prior arc, with all the abductions and all, we saw a little bit of where that comes from. The social anxiety that drives his life, that it's more than just the normal kind of teen wanting to fit in and being anxious about that it's something really deep-seated for him, something that, drives a lot of his behavior, this intense fear of rejection, abandonment, not being good enough. And we see that here, where he is stuck together for first half of that episode. He's still being a colossal asshole. The whole scene where he takes Steven's pants and then just throws them on the floor. what the hell, man? You're captives on an alien spaceship. Is now really the time to be, sulky? But at the same time, we understand the fear that's causing him to be upset and act angrily. And for the first time, we break through to the underlying fear, and he admits that it's been driving him. And that he's ashamed of the way he behaved because he was afraid. And it just made things worse. But, there's a temptation to call this a redemption arc for Lars, but I don't think it was. I think what it was about bringing Lark to a point where he can potentially be redeemed. Because I don't buy the whole, Return of the Jedi thing, where you can terrorize the galaxy for 20-some-odd years as Darth frickin' Vader, and then, 'cause you did one good thing to save your son, it's all okay. No. Especially when, then you get to die after. That's the easy way out. Don't have to deal with any of the consequences of anything that you did. You just do the one good deed and then die and you're done. No, screw that. So Lars is doing that, as cool as it was to see him fight the Robinoids. And I will admit to being utterly shocked when, he was killed. It wasn't, it was a cool moment from a character that I don't much like, but I don't feel like it redeemed him. Because you can't just, it doesn't work that way. You don't have, the list of all the bad things you did, and then you get to list the good things, and they cancel each other out. That's not how it works. It's about who you are, and are you going to do it again? It's about growth and change. It's easy to do one good thing. Even a heroic sacrifice is easy compared to changing who you are as a person, becoming someone better. Which is why I really like what Lars says after he's brought back from the dead. That line, let me be someone, you brought me back from the dead, let me be someone who deserved it. Or brought me back to life, let me be someone who deserved it. I noticed that they avoided saying the word dead in this episode. Off Colors and Lars's head. I wonder if that's... I'm trying to remember if they've ever... other than Rose Quartz, I'm sure they've referred to as being... Actually, have they referred to Rose Quartz as being dead or just gone? Have they ever referred to a character as dead in this show? Because I know that in the past, kids' shows weren't allowed to use the word dead, or at least it was, very fraught. The censors did not like it if they used words like dead or death or so on. And so American-made shows would mostly just not have death be a thing that happened. But then you would get shows being brought over from Japan in the 90s quite a bit, and since then. And they would do ridiculous things with the translation to avoid talking about characters being killed. Because, of course, in Japanese shonen and shoujo shows, which are aimed at, young teens or thereabouts, or younger, deaths happen. And so they would have to, come up with ways to talk around that. And so you get stuff like, sending people to another dimension, or Yu-Gi-Oh's Shadow Realm, or that kind of thing. It's actually funny because none of the examples I can think of are from shows I actually watched. They're from shows that I've watched abridged series of, and that they made fun of this tendency. But it was definitely a thing that happened. I just can't think of any examples from shows I watched. But yeah. So I'm wondering if, like, Nickelodeon still has a rule like that. I know, like, the first season of Korra, and I actually just realized Steven Universe is Cartoon Network, not Nickelodeon. So that doesn't even apply. But, like, in the first season of Korra, they were very careful during, like, the battle near the end of the season. Like, every time an airplane was destroyed, you would see the pilot parachuting out, or you would at least see the parachute opening. But then the season ended in a couple of deaths that were, you didn't see the bodies, but those characters were dead. I'm trying to think of Cartoon Network shows. But Teen Titans, there weren't really deaths. I guess it is still something they avoid. So yeah, they carefully avoid using the word death, but that's obviously what happened, and Steven brought him back to life, and he wants to be someone who deserved it. And that's where the redemption arc starts, in my opinion. You can't... Like, the first step toward redemption is realizing that you don't deserve redemption. Because if you deserved it, you wouldn't need it. Because you would already be a good and deserving person, so what would you have to be redeemed from? Now, the first step is realizing you don't deserve redemption. That you have to work and grow and become someone who deserves it. And the moment you become someone who deserves it, you no longer need it because you've achieved it. So that's what Lars is trying to do. Lars is trying to now become someone who deserves to have been brought back to life. So he's going to work with the off-color gems. It's going to help them escape, live among them on Homeworld. He now, therefore, is one half of a bridge between Earth and Homeworld, which is an interesting thing to have, a secret way of getting back and forth between them very easily, between, his hair and Lion's mane. Which is such a bizarre concept, and I love it. It's... So that's got some interesting storytelling potential, both in terms of, like, what they can do with Lars' character and, like, redemption and all, and what they can do hopping back and forth, because Steven can bring people with him through the portal. It looks like without Steven, it won't open, but he can bring people through. Because, like, Lars was not able, like, pushing on his own hair wasn't able to achieve the effect, and I seem to remember Pearl trying it once and nothing happening, and I'm pretty sure Bismuth tried it after Steven, like, released her and then fled. Like, she was trying to figure out how he got out and pushing on the ground where he had been, and nothing was happening. Yeah, so that's going to be interesting, that he'll be able to bring people back and forth. Fluorite may be a bit of a challenge, but I guess she can always separate Poof, they bring all their gems across, then reform and reform. So that kind of gets to the off-color gems, who I adore all of them. Pat Parasha is obviously the best one. She's amazing. I also think that if she were in more than 2 consecutive episodes, I would hate her. Because she's basically only got one gag, but it's a really cute gag, and couple episodes, it works. More than that, I think it would start to grate. Fluoride is awesome. Like, we've had fusion as a metaphor for intimacy, of any kind, but here we've clearly got fusion being used as a metaphor for like a poly cluster. Which, you know, I don't think I've ever seen that in a show. Like, the idea of a committed relationship that involves more than 2 participants. It's not... Yeah, I can't think of any time I've ever seen it, so that's impressive. And kind of sticks with the general ethos of the show of, you know, that's interesting. Like, I sort of know a couple of poly people, but not that well, and it's not really something that I get. Like, being in a relationship with one person seems like a lot of effort, and you'd expect it to increase in complexity very, very rapidly as you added more people. Because then it's not just one, because 2 people have like one relationship. Bring a 3rd person in, and now there's 3 relationships. You add a 4th, and there's 6? Am I doing my math right? Point is, like, it increases faster than the number of people. Like, the number of relationships increases faster than the number of people. So, that would get really complicated really quickly. But, you know, that's what some people want, and that's the whole ethos of the show, is, you know, who cares how I feel, how you feel is bound to be much more interesting. It's this embrace of the other. It's looking at someone who's different and not just saying, you know, not just tolerating, not just accepting, but saying, you know, that's it. Like, difference is exciting. It's interesting. I actively want to be around people who are different because that makes life more interesting. That's, you know, I think I've talked before in regards to the answers, that, like, being, like, in my opinion, like, the core ethos of the show, and the thing that makes it so great, is that it has this idea that it's been carrying throughout. And that's part of, you know, what makes the off-colors so fun, is, like, these are things we have not seen before. These are gems who, as opposed to having an assigned role that they perform well, but they don't want to stay in it, they don't fit in it at all. Like, we've seen that with Garnet, essentially, because there's no assigned role for a fusion. And that's happening as well with Rhodolite? Is that her name? Rhodonite, I think. Who I think is a Ruby Pearl fusion. She has some visual elements from both, so I think that's probably what she is. So there's that, but we haven't seen these others before, like a poly fusion, as a poly permanent fusion. Like, we've seen poly, you know, fusions with more than 2 gems, but we've never seen a perma-fusion of more than 2 gems. Actually, this arc also gave us something else we've never seen before, an essentially perma-fusion of the same type of gem. Because, like, before we'd seen, like, the rubies form, you know, Mega Voltron Ruby, temporary thing. This was the first time we saw like Topaz seems to stay fused as much as possible, which appears to be, at least based on Aquamarine's attitude, seen as odd but acceptable. So that much is interesting. Then you've got Rudolite, who just formed, like she's almost like the gem fragments, but I think like was essentially born that way. So almost like, conjoined twins. In fact, it even seems like she has a similar origin to conjoined twins, which is like her gem split and partially formed two separate gems, but not completely. Yeah, and then of course there's Paparacha, who just sucks at her assigned role. And those are not really things we've seen before, and so it's kind of cool to have like this little group made of that's living underground, literally. And it makes so much sense that Homeworld would have this underground of rejected gems that escaped, because authoritarian regimes always do. What else did I want to talk about with this? The rest is just kind of, like I've been talking for a while, this is a long vlog. The rest is just kind of random sorted thoughts, not really grouped around any one thing. So I'm just going to kind of throw them out. Steven brought Lars back to life by crying, but we've seen before, Steven's tears do not have healing powers, his spit does. His tears, however, apparently can bring back the dead, which he's never been around a dead person before, so how would they know? This then leads to the natural question, if Rose's tears healed, did her spit revive the dead? And if so, does that mean she licked Lion back to life? And if so, is that why Lion likes lion lickers so much? They remind him of Rose. Lion's smart enough to make that connection. Like, he clearly understands what is being said to him. He doesn't always care what is being said to him, but he understands. I guess that's the end to theories that Lion ate the shards of pink diamond, and that's how, like, he was her pet lion, but he ate the shards of pink diamond and became this thing. Kind of wonder if Lars has any of Lion's other powers, like the running on water, the, like, teleporting shout. For now, I'm going to guess no, but who knows? Maybe we'll get an episode where, once we somehow get Lars back to Earth, assuming that's something that happens before the end of the series, which I'll talk about in a minute, maybe we'll get an episode with like a training montage of Lion teaching Lars to use the pink zombie powers. It's actually funny they talk about it as being zombies, because the other show that is actually still, like, most of the shows I watch are not airing new episodes at the moment. Well, I take that back, because there's a few that are, but one of the shows that I'm watching that's currently still airing new episodes is iZombie, which is a great show, and I really recommend it. And the way zombies work in that show, their senses are kind of deadened, they lose all interest in normal food, they can still talk and think like normal at first. As long as they keep eating brains, they stay that way. And their metabolism is massively slowed down, and their heartbeat beats. Their heart is still beating, but it's incredibly slow. Because they're not actually, like, dead. It's essentially a disease that alters the way their body works. But they're not dead. So that was kind of amusing to me. I highly doubt that was an intentional reference, because Steven Universe doesn't reference live action that much. Very rarely. A little from time to time, but mostly it sticks to referencing animation when it references stuff. So yeah, there's that. It's interesting to me that they even had a trial. That actually really surprised me. That didn't seem to me like something that the Gems would go for. But then it occurred to me that for something high profile like this, you would want Gems to know that, the Diamonds were presiding over it and laid down judgment, so that loyal Gems would be comforted by this, and Gems that were a little less loyal would be frightened by this, and make like a public spectacle of it. It's really cute to me that Yellow Diamond was, was like typing the transcript of the trial, while Blue Diamond was, making those drawings that they do in courts when they don't allow cameras in the court. That was cute. Especially the style of Blue Diamond's drawings. Those were actually kind of adorable. I think that is about everything. And this vlog is over a half hour long, so I think that's plenty. This is great. I'm looking forward to more, but at the same time I'm happy to be getting back to Gravity Falls in the next few videos. Because I left that off at a really interesting point. So, yeah. I'll see y'all next time. Bye!